That's not try. I thought this is like phase 1. What? But what's trial though? Wait, that was just the dungeon boss? What the fuck is the trial then? Bro, I have no idea what's gonna happen. Hello, Baker here, and today I just wanted to talk about the most ridiculous fight, quite possibly, in all of FF14, that being the level 83 trial. Now, as a little warning, this will feature quite a few spoilers for Endwalker, including the 6.5 patch, so just make sure you play through that first before watching. Let's perform the invocation of Elder and get this shit done with. Yeah, boy! Now, what sparked my interest in making this video was that I was in the process of making my Hermes/Van Daniel video, and I wanted to talk about Zodiark in that, in one of those segments, but it didn't feel quite right, and rather I felt this deserves its own little video dedicated to it, because it is quite a crazy encounter, and I just want to get to talking about it here. Yeah, so I have to be honest, I wasn't initially a big fan of this encounter. I would say my opinion surrounding it has changed quite a bit over the years, and there were 3 reasons, I would say, that made me not a big fan of it initially, so I'll just walk you through those reasons one by one here. So number 1 was that I honestly didn't like what they did with Anima, having that kind of an iconic summon and such a big threat in the FF14 universe appear and just be this kind of a dungeon boss. I felt that was kind of lame, and I still hold that belief, but I'll touch more on that later. Number 2 was that I felt they did Zodiark a little dirty. I felt like there could have been more they could have done with him. I'll also elaborate on this later. And number 3 was the thing I said in my Venar video, which was that I felt it was a huge disappointment that we never got the encounter with Hydaelyn against Zodiark. So 2 of those reasons, the Anima and the not having the fight between Hydaelyn and Zodiark, those are kind of outside of the fight itself, so I'm not gonna focus too much on those in this video. I want to more focus on the second point, which was the whole, doing Zodiark dirty. So let's get into covering those points here. Right, so the biggest reason I wasn't initially blown away by this encounter was that I felt it was kind of a cheap little twist that they kind of threw away all this potential with Zodiark just to do a twist. Essentially, that was my stance on it when this came out in 2021. Now, the first time my mind began changing around that a bit was when I was having a conversation with another YouTuber by the name Zodem, and he kind of brought up this good point that it being that kind of a twist in itself added quite a bit of value, and I've thought about it since then, and I think there is merit to that statement. I actually think this was a really good way of making use of Zodiark, right? Because after we dealt with Elidibus, Zodiark really wasn't that interesting. It was basically just a tool that nobody was piloting anymore, essentially. And so what they ended up doing instead was a little bit of misdirection, where essentially they saw this expansion as, you go to the moon and you deal with, Zodiark/Hydaelyn and whatever, and that ended up only being a small part of it. There was the main meat of Endwalker was completely left outside of the, the advertisement. I mean, obviously we ended up dealing with the final days and all that, but you know what I mean. I think it was a good bit of misdirection, and the way they handled Zodiark really helped sell it, because you deal with Zodiark so early in the story at level 83 already, and it really leaves this big open question of like, oh shit, what next? And it definitely achieved that kind of a desirable result. I would also call this a good kind of a twist, which is usually the way you can determine a good twist from a bad one, or a subversion of expectation, is whenever you can retrace it. It may appear a little shocking in the moment, but if you can retrace those steps and there's a logical line that kind of leads to it, I think that's a good sign of a twist being done properly. And that's definitely the case with Zodiark. When you look back on it, you can definitely see like, oh, this was a very logical path for them to take in regards to how we would deal with Zodiark. And indeed, I think many of us had our doubts about the whole, Zodiark being the ultimate bad. I mean, sure, he's kind of portrayed as that way very early on in like A Realm Reborn and such, but especially Shadowbringers onwards, we would kind of expect that he's not gonna be the final boss, and instead the final boss would probably be whatever caused the original calamity, the final days. Many of us, of course, had our theories about, oh, is it gonna be like Genova or Lavos, that kind of a thing. But yeah, regardless, I felt it was a good little twist. Another thing I would like to note is that even though it may seem like they initially handled Zodiark a little bit dirty, they definitely made sure there were consequences to his defeat, right? Because, well, first of all, there's the Fisher quest in Endwalker, which I really recommend you do if you haven't already. I think it's really interesting. It shows like a fun little side effect of Zodiark's ether messing with like the underwater like ether currents or something like that, if I recall correctly, thus affecting marine life. That's pretty interesting. But more importantly, we had the whole Zeromus situation where pretty much the entire reason we're having to fight Zeromus and deal with all this stuff post MSQ was because of Zodiark's defeat and Golbez, utilizing Zodiark's ether in that way. That was very cool. Oh, big bang. There we go. Holy shit. I guess this is a true experience when Rydia dies from Big Bang. So I definitely felt that was very well handled. I am a fan of whenever stories have, lasting consequences of our actions earlier on. Rather than just have them be dissolved immediately, so that was cool. Anima, there's no denying the fact that they did kind of speedrun the entire Garlemald segment and Anima, which was definitely a shame. I will say though, for what it's worth, Anima is a very cool dungeon boss, like a very, very high quality dungeon boss, even having its own little cinematic and such. I was definitely hyped when I saw that for the first time. Oh my god, yes! I wanted to see this so bad. Come on. Do I get fisted? What? I'm not getting fisted though. What? Come on, man. I wanted to get fisted. What is this nonsense? Oh, my lord. Oh. Yeah. Boom. Boom. Shame he doesn't do as much damage as against Dark Anima, but... Yeah, boy! That's all I wanted to see from this boss. Well, actually, no, I wanted to see a lot of things. The pain was cool too, but come on. The feasting is the best part. Though I will also add, it would have been interesting if Anima itself was a trial alongside Zodiark. I remember talking about this with my friend before Endwalker came out. We were thinking like, oh, because it's gonna have so much more story, because they mentioned that. Will it also have maybe more zones or maybe an extra dungeon or an extra trial, or will it do something extra in terms of content to make up for or to, accommodate the extra story, right? That was my thought process before the expansion came out. I definitely think having Anima as a trial could have worked out really well because, think about it, it would have actually sold that entire misdirection element even more because, you fight Anima as a trial and then it's like, oh shit, right after you have Zodiark also as a trial at the same level. That would have been just mind-blowing, right? That would have been awesome, at least in my opinion. And so I do think there was a bit of a missed opportunity there. But I do want to talk about Anima and Garlemald more in my eventual Doro and Walker analysis, especially when I get to talking about Garlemald. So I don't want to delve on that too much here. But yeah, it is one of those things where, I appreciate FF14 for being so structured and, we know what to expect with each patch. I don't mind the structured nature of it, but I do feel like at times we could benefit from a little bit of a curveball, just do something a bit different to surprise us, because as this example demonstrates, I think it could even enhance the narrative in certain ways. I really do think so. So certainly stick to the formula like 95% of the time, but maybe there's that 5%, rare occasion where it's like, okay, now we're gonna delve a bit from this path and do something different. I think that would be a healthier approach personally, but that's just my opinion. And finally, regarding not seeing the fight play out against Hydaelyn versus Zodiark, it's been a few years since I released that Venar video, and I gotta be honest, I still very much have that stance. I think it was a huge waste of potential, and it could have been an amazing encounter. Especially, I remember someone commented on it and said, what if it was even playable, where you play as Hydaelyn and fight Zodiark? Oh my god, that would have been so awesome. But I understand there could have been budget constraints and things of that nature. Obviously stuff like this doesn't just materialize. I understand that there's logistics behind it too. But still, a bit of a shame that we never got to see that fight play out. But this and the whole Anima thing, I guess they don't necessarily impact the fight itself, the level 83 trial itself. So you could say those are only partially connected, which is true, so that's why I'm not delving too much into those in here. And in fact, if you want to hear more on my opinions about the Zodiark's Hydaelyn fight, I have an entire segment dedicated to that in my Venar videos, so there you go. I should also note that a common piece of critique at the time was that, after you defeat Zodiark, there's this whole segment with the Loporits, which is quite slow in comparison to what we just had, and people use that as kind of like, oh, the whiplash is so bad, here, and I never personally felt that way when I did it, but kind of similar. I think that's not very related to the topic at hand too much. I just wanted to mention that. Now, given that this is a video about the level 83 trial, I think it would be a good thing to actually discuss the contents of the fight itself, so that's what I'm gonna get into now. So if I had to give a description of each of the 3 Endwalker trials, I would kind of describe them like this. With the Endsinger, you have this very emotional finale. With Hydaelyn, it's this triumphant moment for you and your characters. And Zodiark is basically a cocaine trip or an acid trip, where you basically don't know what the fuck is going on here, but I love it. It's awesome for that. It's just so crazy as a fight, honestly. So first of all, the build up to the encounter is just phenomenal. I love it. There's just such good tension there. And then when the fight finally happens, it's like, yes, let's go. And it's just great. So first of all, the music, I think it's probably the best theme from Endwalker, like a trial theme. The main reason I'm a big fan of it is because, funnily enough, this is actually the only music from all of Endwalker trials, yes, up until 6.5. I don't know how many fights that even is, but it's crazy to think about that. This is the only original, completely original soundtrack from all of Endwalker trials, which is kind of nuts, but it's great. I love it. Endcaller, I think it's called. Such a great theme. It really captures that kind of final boss vibe, but at the same time, it's not the final boss. I don't know if that makes sense. But many Final Fantasy games have very similar bosses, where you're led to think, oh, this is the end, but actually it's not, if you know what I mean. I think the difficulty is also on point. Obviously, it is a normal trial, so I'm not saying like it's some mind-blowingly difficult fight, but it's actually quite feasible to wipe in this encounter, especially if you have quite a few sprouts doing it. So I think they nailed the difficulty there, as far as FF14 normal difficulty is concerned. I love Fandaniel's voice lines in this fight. His maniacal remarks, and just some very good lines like, "Will you live to see the end?" You can tell the voice actor was definitely having fun with this fight. The mechanics themselves are pretty cool. I like them, very flashy. So just good eye candy. And what follows, the whole thing I mentioned, like you don't really know what's happening next, but you definitely did something, with the whole where Fandaniel kind of offs himself as Zodiark, and it's like, oh shit, what's gonna happen now? Just a great encounter overall, honestly. I don't have too many negatives to point out. The same cannot be said for the extreme version of the fight, unfortunately. It was definitely one of the weaker ones in Endwalker. And it's a bit of a shame because there was definitely potential, and some of the mechanics are fun to solve. It's just that this is one of those fights, like Rubicante and such, where you can just basically follow someone, you know, a Dorito fight, as some people call it. Or even if, you know, you did this on release and maybe everyone didn't know immediately where to go, you can very easily just kind of mitigate stuff and survive the, you know, the major mechanics. So regardless, it just wasn't very interesting as a fight. I am definitely more of a fan of fights where you have more personal responsibility, which Endwalker definitely had some nice EX trials like Valvalis and Golbez, but this unfortunately wasn't one of them. So it's a bit of a misfire there, unfortunately, but other than the EX trial, I think this fight definitely left a good legacy. I think it was a good encounter, a very well designed one, especially, you know, with the whole twist element I was talking about. I think it really added to and enhanced Endwalker's narrative quite nicely, which is ultimately, you know, what you want from such a meaningful boss fight. So in retrospect, I didn't feel Zodiark was wasted per se. There could have been more things they could have done with him, like the fight I was mentioning with Hydaelyn, but overall I am satisfied. And in retrospect, I felt like I was a bit harsh on this fight when it came out, which is funny because for most people it's the opposite, you know. Initially when something comes out, they praise it to hell and back, and then later they find themselves more critical. I think for me it was a bit of a reverse, essentially. But yeah, I appreciate the level 83 trial a lot more nowadays for what it is and what it accomplished. And it was a great addition to the story, as I said. So yeah, those have been my thoughts on the level 83 trial. I'm curious what you guys think, and if you want to stick around for when I drop that video on Hermes, subbing my channel is the easiest way to do so. Have a nice day.